Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. A distinct primary flavor to our program this Sunday morning. Lots of attention this last week on the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee as Democrats tried to determine what they want their primary calendar to look like. But as we know, New Hampshire will cast the first primary ballots no matter what. The man holding the legal shield for the state in this fight is Secretary of State David Scanlan, who's our guest this morning. Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good morning, Adam.
So it's rare we get breaking election news, but we managed to have some on this Friday just before we were taping this interview, and we want to talk about it before we get to the primary. A federal judge is striking down key provisions of New Hampshire's proof-of-citizenship registration and voting law, which passed in 2024. First, what's your reaction to this ruling?
Well, it's a very long ruling. It's about 90 pages. The attorneys in my office and the Attorney General's office are reviewing the nature of the ruling. I think it's a blow to voter confidence in the state because it is important that voters exercise their right to vote in an easy way, but it's also important for voters to be able to know that the people participating in that election are qualified. And the bill that was struck down, the law that was struck down, certainly did that. I don't think it's too much to ask for voters to present documentation to prove certain qualifications. But now we're going back to the way it was, where we're trusting people based on a signing of an affidavit to prove those qualifications.
Yeah, explain. This is, as you noted, a very long ruling. There's a lot of legal jargon there that I was reading through it. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? But for the average voter out there, what does this mean about what happens in September and November?
Well, what this means in the short term is that we will be conducting the registration process at state elections the way we have done in the past, which means a voter can come into the polling place and use an affidavit to prove certain qualifications. We will be looking at whether there is an opportunity to appeal the decision to a higher court. So in the long term, things may change again.
But essentially, though, for a primary, the state primary, and then general election in November, we're back to the way it was essentially in 2024?
Yes.
Okay. Reading through this ruling, it sounds like it got a little antagonistic there in terms of, the plaintiffs saying that they didn't get certain information about how the law was implemented. What's your perspective on this? And the judge saying, oh, that it warrants sanction, that somehow you didn't share enough information about the implementation.
Well, the state presented its case. It was sincere and honest, and we provided the information that we were required and was pertinent, and the other side did the same thing.
As you noted, moving forward, do you think this case, and perhaps not New Hampshire's case, but this issue is eventually going to reach the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's how we'll see this sorted out?
I think it could very well end up there.
Okay. All right. We'll keep an eye on that, so appreciate your perspective there. The state is poised to enter another primary cycle here. There was a lot of big news this week as the Democrats presented before the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee. As we look ahead, let's quickly look back and see, in your opinion, what are some of the lessons learned from the 2024 process that you see really applying to 2028? Well,
New Hampshire did not waver. We complied with our statute. We gave the reasons why it was important that New Hampshire hold the first in the nation primary, and we did that. And in the end, the delegates that were awarded in that primary to the Democratic National Convention were seated, and so I claim that as a success. We maintained our status. This time around, I thought that the New Hampshire Democratic delegation gave a very good presentation on why New Hampshire should be first. Whether they should be going through that process to begin with is another question, because our law is going to apply. But it was an opportunity to let the rest of the country know that New Hampshire is probably the only state left where the average American citizen that would like to be president of the United States can come here, file, run a good campaign without name recognition and a lot of money, and do well. The benefit of being first is if a person like that can do well, they have the balance of the primary nominating events to take their message across the country and maybe become president of the United States.
In 2024, the chief antagonist of New Hampshire on the Rules and Bylaws Committee for the DNC tried to make the case that the New Hampshire primary would be, quote, meaningless. Your job is to ensure New Hampshire goes first. You don't really have to worry about the relevance aspect of it, and you upheld that part of the deal. Relevance is not guaranteed. But Do you think the 2024 vote here rose above that attempt to sort of smear the primary as meaningless?
Yes, and I say that for a number of reasons. The voters in this state care about their elections, and even though that presidential primary was not sanctioned by the DNC, it was still very important to the voters in this state. And they went out, the Democrats went to the polls, and they gave Joe Biden a very sizable write-in victory. And what was impressive about it was that Joe Biden got more write-in votes running for his second term than both Barack Obama and Bill Clinton did when they were running for their second term and their name was on the ballot.
Yeah, and arguably that message sent nationally was important as well. Even if it wasn't ideal for the Democrats, they did something that got national attention.
Yes, yes. It just showed the importance of New Hampshire, the history, the tradition, and the electoral culture that we have here is no mistake.
Yeah, it's always kind of interesting to watch national party officials like these folks on the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee, and there are new members there, try to confront the reality of New Hampshire's state law. They can't change it, but sometimes they feel like they can get around it or do other things there. So we know what's going to happen here, but lay it out for that national audience. What will happen if the DNC tries to relegate New Hampshire once again?
Well, the Secretary of State in New Hampshire gets to decide when the date of the New Hampshire primary is going to be, and that date will be determined based on our statutory requirement that New Hampshire goes at least 7 days before any similar event. There may be some question about what constitutes a similar event this time, because now we have Iowa would like their position back, but the Iowa Democrats have taken steps to turn their caucus into more of a primary, which could be problematic for New Hampshire when it comes time to determine that date. The state of Nevada has changed their caucus format over to a primary. And so both of those states that would like to be first also have very new processes that they're dealing with, whereas New Hampshire's process is entrenched. We've been doing it for over 100 years. We've certainly withstood the test of time. We run great, solid elections. The votes are cast and counted on the day of the election. The media and the nation know the results when it's over, and we have done that time after time after time.
You mentioned Iowa and Nevada. Over the last 20 or 30 years, really the more consistent threats have come from the state level, not necessarily from the party level. Do you see that potentially returning this time around, that another state might look at what New Hampshire has done and say, hey, wait a second, we can do this too?
Yes. I think that the DNC is taking a much larger role in determining the early calendar, but that doesn't preclude other states from wanting to move outside of that as well. New Hampshire has a law that may require it if we don't get assign the first position, but it sounds like the other states are contemplating their options as well.
We talked about relevance before. Do you think the New Hampshire primary can survive as an institution if it is fighting this battle in every cycle, that there's essentially a permanent rupture between a national political party wanting to go in a different direction and then New Hampshire having to hold an unsanctioned contest on one side over and over?
I certainly think that it can, but the voters of New Hampshire are going to have to want to hold it. And as long as that support is there and we continue to follow our state law, I think we will stand the test of time.
How concerned are you, though? We've seen a divergence in some of the polling in support for First in the Nation primary. There's now a bit of a partisan split. Republicans remain strongly in favor of maintaining First in the Nation status. And then it's more of a question among Democrats. Some of them don't see the primary as much of a positive. I don't know if they got into the details of why, but overall support is lesser among Democrats. Is that the real long-term threat, losing the will in New Hampshire to defend the primary?
That's always the long-term threat, losing the will. And so it is the job of the Secretary of State and other state agencies to educate the voting population on why elections are important and why the presidential primary is important to the state. The Republicans, on their side, it's never in the conversation because it's just solid. It's understood that Iowa will have its traditional caucus and New Hampshire will follow with the presidential primary.
Yeah. One last question before we wrap up here. There's another court case you're involved in with the Trump administration seeking voter data here in New Hampshire. Before we wrap up here, why is it important that New Hampshire defend this information and not just volunteer it to the administration? Well,
again, this is another situation where the Secretary of State is following the law that's on the books. And New Hampshire was required to have a statewide centralized voter database when the Help America Vote Act passed in 2002. When our state legislature created the law that provided for that, they were very clear, and this was a Republican legislature that was very clear that the personal data in that database is to be kept confidential. That law has not changed. So there are two checklists, or basically two lists in the statewide voter database. One is the public voter checklist, which has the name of every voter, the address, and then the private list contains driver's license numbers, last 4 digits of Social Security, and things like that, should be kept confidential.
All right. Well, lots to unpack here, and we appreciate your perspective as always, Mr. Secretary, and we'll definitely be in communication about the primary as the months go by.
Great to be with you.
Okay.